Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's discussion. I'm Jonathan Murray. I'm from the XDC community, and I'm thrilled to be able to host this conversation today, and thank you all for joining. Over the next hour or so, we'll dive into technologies that are shaping the world today. That's data privacy, AI agents, real-world asset tokenization, and we'll look at how they all tie together through the power of blockchain. Whether you're a tech enthusiast or just curious about the future, we're here for an insightful discussion. So let's get started. I want to introduce our guests today with us. First, we have Ian. Ian Cain is the co-founder of QUBIC Labs. And Ian and his team made headlines last year with the US first blockchain-based municipal bond out of Quincy, Massachusetts. QUBIC Labs also just finished a 12-week accelerator bringing together projects, businesses, governments, and academia. And they're actually having a pitch day tomorrow for their accelerator with Fidelity. Ian brings some insights about the public sector, looking into using blockchain technology. And I'm excited to go deeper into that with him today. Next up, we have Matt. Matt is from the XDC Foundation. He's the director of the XDC Foundation. Nice to have you, Matt. And Matt is leading the charge on the XDC network with RWA Accelerator in collaboration with Plug and Play. Their first cohort was recently announced, and they had a demo day in Dubai during Token 2049. And last but not least, yeah.
Appreciate you having me.
Thanks. Last but not least, we have Jason Melo, co-founder of TouchBrick. Jason's background spans the top open source, cloud native, and decentralized infrastructure tech companies, anywhere from ADP, Nearform, the Linux Foundation, all the way to Paxos. And recently, Jason launched TouchBrick, and it's transforming how businesses handle data privacy and security. And they're taking an AI-powered edge and really integrating that with blockchain. And so I want to welcome everyone here today. And let's get this kicked off with Jason. Jason, nice to have you on.
Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. So we all agree that protecting sensitive information and data such as medical records, financials, IP, it's really non-negotiable in industry these days. With the rise in cyber attacks and laws like HIPAA, right? How are you guys looking at keeping this data protected? So for those new to TouchBrick, can you give us your elevator pitch? What are you doing? How are you innovating? And how are you keeping businesses compliant?
Yeah, happy to, and I'm sure over the course of the conversation we'll dive into all more of the details on it. And I appreciate the question. For TouchBrick, really where we sit is how do we bring the whether generative AI, agentic AI, however you want to call it, but that type of intelligence into enterprise databases themselves, right? And really wherever data lives, that's on chain, that's within different systems of record, and just the kind of litany of files that any organization uses to drive their business. So TouchBrick eliminates data security risks from any data use case. Our AI finds sensitive data across the enterprise and generates high fidelity data twins of that sensitive data. So with that, we can, TouchBrick can ensure that data is never exposed, you prevent breaches, and you guarantee compliance. But the really kind of cool thing with all of that is that this is the enabler to innovation, right? Data is the lifeblood of everything that we do. Yes, we need to keep it protected. We need to stop the kind of scourge of data breaches, but it's such a limiting factor for organizations to innovate, and that's where TouchBrick comes in. So, we're helping clients, our customers, to safely train their AI models within their organization and actually bring their corporate data to bear into those use cases. Delivering test environments at scale that are fully indicative of critical production infrastructure, and giving that to whether it's internal developers or even third parties in a fully safe manner. That's how we unlock innovation and understand that data is the driver to all of that. So that's really what TouchBrick is and where we sit and who we work with.
That's awesome. You touched on it a little bit, but what are some of the biggest threats to data privacy, and how does blockchain sort of mitigate those?
Yeah, so it's kind of a huge question in that way, but really, I think the biggest risks are around how we need to use our data, right? Like, companies can't exist without partnerships, right? Third parties that are coming in that need to get access to data to do something with it, whether it's presenting it in different ways or bringing data into an organization. That's probably one of the biggest risks. So we see the headlines around data breaches recently. It's so many of them are these third-party providers that are leveraging our data without even us knowing. We have a relationship with a certain company, but that company is then working with a number of different companies and sharing our information, and breaches are happening there. And so our approach and our premise to that is to say, like, let's not create kind of a privacy by design or have to design privacy around data. Let's bring that privacy to the data itself. And then therefore any use case is protected by default. We then have the non-default, which is authorized users need access. We need to actually get into sensitive data in those certain use cases, which is actually the minority of time versus the majority of what we do with data. So we kind of flip the script around, like, let's not just say, let's take data and protect everything around it. Let's protect the data itself. And then in those cases where you need to access it, that's where we have the mechanisms to do that. And that's where the blockchain comes in. Because for the authorized access in those use cases, we want to say, look, I want to leverage blockchain consensus verification and those mechanisms to be a layer of protection around my data, right? Crypto wallets and whatever blockchain you want to look at have really never been hacked outside of social engineering hacks on people's individual wallets. So that's the best security layer that we have right there sitting in front of us. And so that's one of the key ways that we leverage blockchain. We also take into account and use blockchain from like a network effect perspective, because if you think about cybersecurity in general, so much of that relies on networks, right? Like critical vulnerability lists and white hat hackers that are working together to understand problems and fix systems. Let's put that out on a network that machines can participate on directly, and benefit from all of that and get better at protecting data. So that's what the blockchain means to us and how we make data more private and secure through that.
That's awesome. Great description. And Jason, thanks for being here today with us.
Thank you.
I want to jump over to Matt real quick. Hey, Matt. I guess not many people know this, but Matt and I have been working together in some capacity for about 3 years or so, building the XDC network and building ecosystems. So great to have you on, Matt. I think this is actually the first time we've been on a show together, or maybe on an official call. So glad to have you.
Kind of wild.
I know.
Appreciate it.
So you were just in Dubai, Token 2049. You hosted the Dubai plug and play for the demo day. What was obviously the sentiment today's pretty green, no pun intended, but what was the sentiment there? And how was the overall event? What was the energy like? What was RWA's? Just give us a feel.
Yeah, for sure. And really, thanks for having me. As you said, us working together over the last 3 years has been, really just awesome. We've just really trying to make XDC and the network just grow every day. Really in Dubai, what was very interesting was, really where XDC network now sits with this RWA narrative. It's been the focus since day one before RWAs were, kind of the hype. But, with the event, it was great to to really be able to see the projects that we've brought onto the network, such as Clearpool and Polytrade, the Tokeny, Plume network. Like, everyone is looking at ways that we can, all boats can rise, right? Like, where are the ways that we can actually create impact, that create adoption, that allow, these companies to kind of take that next step. So to say that there's nothing but opportunities, there are multiple collaborations happening between the projects, and looking at different ways that we can work together, especially with like a TouchBrick. So it's just seeing the real value being added, and not just these ideas, is where the big time change has come in. I don't know if this is breaking up a little bit, but
no, that's great. I was before we went live, I was talking to Jason about one of the companies I work with is a biopharmaceutical, and how data integrity and data security is so important there. And seeing what the accelerator from XDC Foundation and Plug and Play are bringing into the XDC network is awesome. These are real world use cases, right? Can you talk about the goals of the accelerator and what you see coming out of the cohort one?
Yeah,
for sure. What we just learned from Jason, but
definitely, it seems like it's going in and out just a little bit. But the projects are a diverse group, right? So really, there's our Silicon Valley demo day, which is going to be in June, and these projects will be pitching in front of VCs and showing kind of the different deliverables that they have, right? So you have really just ways that individual users and institutions can earn yield in a very seamless way, but making sure that like the on-ramps and the accessibility that you have on off-chain is available on-chain, right? With so security and simpleness, I mean, are pretty much going a long way. With a project like Plume, I think is a good project to touch on, because we're looking at how do we kind of combine ecosystems and make these products accessible to users in both communities, just really getting value on chain that can then be recirculated.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having you on. It's great to see your face, Matt.
It's a pleasure, man. Thanks for having me.
Ian, welcome. Thanks for taking time out of your day. I know you are about to have your accelerator demo day tomorrow and probably getting prepped for that. When I heard about QUBIC Labs and how you're actually having an accelerator and incubating projects in the Boston area, and that's where I'm from, obviously I was super interested. And so can you tell us about the mission of QUBIC Labs and the types of projects that are actively building on your accelerator?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And Jonathan, thanks for having me. I appreciate the kind introduction at the top of the show, and it's great to be with you, Matt and Jason. So QUBIC Labs, we started in 2019 with the idea of spreading entrepreneurship and innovation south of Boston. We'd seen a lot of activity in the Cambridge area, and Seaport had sort of built a whole new city down there, but we wanted to spread the love to an area that was seeing its own economic resurgence, and we wanted to sort of complement the real estate development activity with commerce. We wanted to see startups sort of seed and grow. We started by looking at financial and government technologies. John, my co-founder, and I had come from backgrounds in finance and government, and so that made the most sense. So we weren't even initially looking at blockchain until it found us. I sit on the city council here in Quincy, where I've served since 2016, and it was through a program that was run through the state, educating local elected leaders on opportunities for blockchain deployment in cities and towns. And it was at that point that we sort of said, you know what, no one's really building an ecosystem for the startups here, and I think that would be a differentiator for us. But we also sit at this unique place between public and private, where we can try to identify opportunities for blockchain deployment. And so, from the get-go, in 19, 20, 21, when days were good and everything was hot in the market, in the crypto space, we were kind of like, what's going on here? Where are the real applications that are going to like touch people in ways that they don't have to understand wonky tech, but it's going to bring, value to their lives. It's sort of like, let's put the tech in the background. And so, we've gone through iterations. In 2021, we did a big, competition, which sort of proved the appetite for companies and there would be development and to join our ecosystem. 2022, we took over an event called Boston Blockchain Week in an effort to sort of create more of an environment and ecosystem, but also with the idea that blockchain and crypto had a vibe, right? People were moving from Massachusetts to places where Jason lived, like Miami. And, it was hot down there. It was more friendly. But we were kind of playing to the long-term competitive advantages like capital and knowledge base here in Massachusetts, saying, we'll play for the long run. But that's kind of worked for us because we've kept our head down. QUBIC Labs itself is a 501c3 nonprofit, so all of our support has come from contributors, and we've raised state money. We put together a first of a kind public-private partnership in 2022 with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We received the first and I think only investment in blockchain that the state has made. And out of that, we built a research and development program and sort of commercialization as well. And we've been giving out $25,000 non-dilutive grants to founders across the space since about the end of 23. By August, we'll have given out 25 of those grants, and we've seen some cool projects. They've been, really across the board. The places that you would think around smart contracts. A lot. Some of them have touched into digital identity. Others have been, focused on wallets. Payment rails. So we've seen some cool projects come through, and that program has allowed the companies to raise money on the back end of that. So they've raised many multiples of private capital on the back end that we've helped connect to capital providers. We've mostly operated through this incubator, not a finite period of time incubator relationship with our startups until just this year. We launched our first dedicated 12-week accelerator program, and it's been really cool. We had hired a program director at the beginning of 2024 to help us to really style this. And Manuel Rinaldi is just a star. This guy put together, a lot of relationships that we had. And through his experience with an organization in New York that he had worked prior to joining us, put together a truly world-class accelerator program. So we put out a call for applications at the beginning of November. We closed them at the beginning of January this year. And we had about 250 applicants from around the world. We chose 11 companies. And those 11 companies have been going through a dynamic hybrid program. 10 weeks was online, and every work day of those 10 weeks, they had at least one mentor advisor delivering programmatic elements, right? And of course, it's what you would expect: sales, marketing, go-to-market, capital raising, public speaking, legal, compliance, regulatory, from all across the space. We had folks from Solana, MoonPay, Cardano, Cadena. We had top legal advisors, top capital, venture capitalists as well. And we doing this new sort of program, we didn't want to be too advantageous, so it's an equity-free program. And I think what we have found is that we've created value on both sides meaning for the entrepreneurs and the founders who've come through. They're seeing a lot of value. I mean, they're here right now, and I'd be happy to bring them in to say so, which is awesome. But the mentors and advisors are now seeing the ecosystem that we've been able to put together. And so, over the 5 years, I mean, this has been an energy movement project, right? We're trying to get people to recognize a new area as a global tech and development hub for blockchain technology. And we've been doing that, from Quincy, Massachusetts. And we've also been looking at, as you identified, is trying to connect to related and supported institutions. So, we've got a relationship with the city of Quincy. We have relationships with many different types of businesses in the area. But, we've wanted to see blockchain deployments, again, that people can see that they don't have to fundamentally understand the tech behind. So, one of our portfolio companies that QUBIC supports, I wasn't involved in the project due to my proximity as a city councilor, of course, but they were able to be the advisor to the financial advisor on the first municipal bond offering in the country, okay, on blockchain. Now, this was this was a project, we had looked at places. Hong Kong did this. There was a corporate bond done in Germany. Lugano, Switzerland is another example. We want to be like those cities, right? And so now we have just demonstrated this use case that puts us on a global footing with these cities. Okay, Lugano, Switzerland came over a couple of years ago to Boston Blockchain Week. They talked all about their experience. The CFO of our city sat on the same panel and then executed that same project. The city will go to market on the second blockchain bond for a school that was appropriate. The appropriation was approved by the city council. That bond in Q2, I think. Which
so, Ian.
Yeah.
It sounds like all of you over the past 5+ years, 7 years in Jason's case, have really been innovating through regulations, right? You've talked a lot about regulations and growing real world applications, bringing value on chain. Matt talked about that and really paving the way, all of you, for future startups to be really building with this technology. Matt alluded to it earlier. XDC has been in the game for years without really, getting attention. So in 2017, they started at Trade Finance. 2019 was the launch of the Layer 1 XDC network. In 2021, we were doing RWAs, but back then they were called NFTs, and we were doing it with invoices. What else? We integrated with Securitize in 2022 or early 23 with their U.S. Treasury funds, right? And then just news today about XDC joining the MiCA Alliance. It just sort of goes to show the XDC network continues to align our regulatory clarity to provide ecosystems with that regulation that businesses are expecting, right? And so on this topic of regulatory clarity and what's happening in the US right now with the government, how do you see, and maybe we'll start with Jason here, how do you see government supporting RWAs? How are we going to drive mass adoption? And what is the consideration to be taken with data privacy?
Yeah, but it's a great question and a huge question, right? Across like so many different, participants and everything. And, Ian's got a big smile because this is probably his day in, day out.
I'll let Ian go afterwards, but
yeah, no, absolutely.
No, it's a big question though, as you say.
Yeah. So I think, where to, from a government perspective, I think it starts with education. It starts with actually like understanding, like helping, whether it's politicians, policymakers, regulators, kind of get out of headlines and into actuality, right? Especially if we look at like RWAs, it's like understanding like what is like a real world asset and what's a corollary and things that came before blockchain, things that we've been doing, kind of in and out, right? We have patterns and precedents for all of this. Just because we now have this amazing technology that allows us to do it at these scales and decentralization doesn't mean that it's like a whole big, unknown that we have to be kind of afraid of and driven by headlines around it. It's just, it's a continuation of that. And so understanding that, and then what differences of application and of understanding the technologies bring into play, right? Because now you've just democratized and decentralized it, federated it across the world. You've got a whole bunch of different participants than just people who can like show up in a city and do some business or do a thing, right? So there's that kind of like approach and awareness and understanding, I think is critical for that. Then the other side, for me especially, is founders and entrepreneurs that are coming in with like a regulatory first kind of mindset, right? Like we're touching assets, we're touching money, right? Like when we founded Paxos and ItBit, we set out to say, look, we don't want to just stand up a Bitcoin exchange, right? There's at the time Mt. Goxes of the world, and Kraken was starting to come forward and things like that. Hey, that's great, but we want to actually bring crypto to capital markets. Right? How do we do that? How are we plug and play with the standards? How do we comply from a regulatory perspective? We were the first ever to actually bring a market maker to the crypto economy. Like, how do you do that? And and do that in a way that you can actually maintain things like banking relationships and everything that you need to make that happen. And we set out doing that back in 2011, right? So like we've been at this for a while and still kind of having some stumbles with it. So I think it's that regulatory first approach. It's the same thing that we're doing with that we've done with TouchBrick, is to say, like, if we look at like GRC, right, like government regulatory compliance, like that whole kind of like stack and world, how do we provide value to that? Because regulation is not something that businesses can avoid. So if you can really come in and provide value at a regulatory perspective, you have such an amazing commercial driver for your business. Like, people have to do business with you, right? And you can demonstrate directly to them like the savings and what it actually means to their top line and their bottom line. Another great example for us is, we're starting to do a lot more with insurtech and in the insurance space, driving, regulation and mitigating cyber risk policies through connecting like the ability for an organization to attest to their data as an asset and have like on-chain compliance around that. Like, that's a massive unlock for what we're doing in the insurance space. So that, I think, is like kind of like, the approach and where, people like ourselves and founders and whatnot should be looking at and should be thinking of to drive things forward.
Awesome. Ian, you want to jump in here?
Sure. Yeah. There's a lot. I appreciated Jason's comment that you've been trying to bring crypto to capital markets, and I think a lot of how I look at the space is, how do we get this? How do we make more use cases applicable to a regular person? How do we get this connected to more individuals or people? Because the reason why I think that the government has ostensibly not supported this space is because people don't understand, they don't know about it, it doesn't touch them. You know what I mean? And if there's no will of the people to support it, then politicians don't need to support it. But there's been certainly an opportunity for politicians to raise capital for their own political ends through this space. But I still think there's a disconnect between people on the ground and making this an issue that would make them support it. So we try to think about, how can we make this more relevant in people's lives that then drives the support, the sort of public opinion, if you will, for politicians and otherwise to support the space. So, we like this muni bond project because eventually the goal is, let's create a retail market that allows an individual to participate in an investment in their locality, in their municipality, in their city and town, aligning a civic and financial interest at the local level, right? And then we want to enable more municipalities to be on the payment rails, to accept different crypto for fees and taxes. We then want to enable merchants to be able to accept more. We want to make it more demonstrative. So that's the kind of ethos that we've got here in the city. But I also think that there's largely been turf warfare going on. So Jason, you talked about being involved in the space for so long before anyone had any idea what was going on, and before the philosophy of the space changed, right? Because the traditional or the fundamentalist Bitcoiners were this libertarian thought, and so they wanted to use this in a specific way before it became this store of value that now people are riding as they would a stock. And so now you've got the government who doesn't want to lose their share of the pie, right, by way of tax. You got the central banks who don't want to lose their participation in the creation of money, right? And then you've got sort of the crypto people who want to ride it up, and you got the big. So there's a whole bunch of different schools of thought into how this is going to play out that I think we're watching actively settle. I don't even know what time that vote is today in Senate for the cloture vote to see if this stablecoin bill is going to move forward. But I think a lot of the space is kind of surprised that these things are taking as long as they have with what they identified as a favorable administration. So I think there's still a lot playing out. I think people still don't understand it enough to care. And I think that drives a lot of the support from the federal government, which is why, there are still places to create value. Of course, you just need to be mindful of the regulatory or the legal regimes that already exist that you'd create a business around.
It's always it's an interesting path to follow when there's no path, right? Matt, so looking at data privacy, XDC Network launched their subnets. And how do you see subnets being used to balance transparency, privacy, public, sort of intertwine for RWAs? Is there a need for the subnets for that diverse regulatory, need, I guess?
Yeah, for sure. It's been really the subnets. That's been the goal since day one. It's also a big reason why, like, Jason and I've been talking for so long, and why TouchBrick is part of this accelerator, looking at how can they actually utilize these subnets with their AI and privacy tech. A lot of these institutions, they're just not going to be okay with every single thing being on the public blockchain, being able to be tracked. But if we can have these subnets where they can still have the privacy needed with personal data and HIPAA rules, all the sensitive information, while still pushing necessary public accounting data to the ledger for transparency, I mean, it's kind of like best of both worlds here. I think where I'm really excited to see is, like, a project like TouchBrick coming in, and maybe it's a one-click installer, but making that really a seamless onboarding for these institutions. Like right now, we do have a few pilots going on, and it's that's kind of being ironed out. But really, how this flow, I think the subnets linking to the public chain are going to be absolutely crucial.
That's awesome. I didn't know about that connection. Yet again, another connection I learned about today. I learned that Jason went to college in Boston. It's crazy. You touched on
founder of Paxos too, right?
I know. I didn't know that one either. Yeah. I got to get up to speed, I guess. I want to touch on AI. You talked about AI. I was actually listening to John McBee. He had his workshop on Monday, and he was giving history of AI and LLMs. He really digs deep into technology. And he talked about a paper that Google put out in 2017 called "Attention is All You Need." And it's really, in essence, the start of vector databases and where generative AI started to get kicked off. In the last 8+ years, we went from not being able to associate words to creating movies, predicting markets, and who knows how quickly and exponentially this AI is going to grow. And so, Jason, can you tell us about TouchBrick's infrastructure, how you're using AI, machine learning, and agents really to improve that data security?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that. AI and especially agentic AI, it is it basically depends on having well-structured indicative data sets, right? And where that comes from is or not where it comes from, but in order to do that and for companies to actually take advantage of it, you don't want to just leap to okay, cool, let's just let the models, let that whole thing ingest all of our data, right? Because then you have so many other now security vectors and issues that opens up, because those models don't have the same access control lists, like same authorization, authentication around it as maybe your system of record database does. Internal threats are so much increased, right? If you were to bring all of that data into, say, generative AI or agents or whatnot, because now you can do things where, within an organization, you could, a disgruntled salesperson could grab all of the CRM records by doing an end around through your language model, as opposed to, well, Salesforce is locked down, but we got all of those records anyway. Right. So it's that kind of usage and innovation where TouchBrick sits really.
That's an interesting attack vector. I didn't think about that one.
Yeah. Yeah, so it opens up all those things, and it just speaks back to kind of that fundamental premise that we have around making the data itself safe to use, right, and protecting. We do that through those synthetic twins. That's how we really become a driver for AI, because, like I said, data is the lifeblood. Structured data and indicative data is how you do that, and that's how we that's how we sit in the world and kind of help companies that are trying to move into that space, adopt AI. Because you mentioned like vector databases and things like that. We now have MCP, which allows models and agents to talk natively through tools to speak with APIs and whatnot. All of that is still like data consumption use cases, right? What abstractions do we bring in that models can understand to interact with and consume data?
Yeah, John's entire workshop was titled MCP to MVP. So I think you guys might be able to speak on that from a dev perspective far better than I can. Ian, you earlier talked about we the people and how government's not going to move unless, right? And so when you're talking to projects in the accelerator and you're speaking to them, like especially AI projects, are you looking at like ethical considerations for biased decisions or data consent, user autonomy, or anything like that? And how would that use AI and blockchain?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, we're evolving into AI. We haven't supported as many AI projects. We've mostly been, the verticals that I mentioned, finance, some government, and then like the sort of intertwining blockchain. But we actually just pitched a grant to the state on using our infrastructure to do an AI project. We've established a great relationship with NVIDIA and and others that I think we'd be well placed to support that area. And most of the concept in that proposal was around, of course, developing ethical solutions, to the best of our abilities. And of course, the interesting thing that you guys were just talking about, years ago I worked for a company called Luminoso, and Luminoso was spun out of the MIT Media Lab, and it was an early. It's a natural language processing technology that, I think was a little early, but definitely novel. The project that it was spun out of was called the Open Mind Common Sense project out of the MIT Media Lab. And basically, the founders have built a lexicon or sort of a corpus of 1 million words and phrases that knew how to interconnect based on concept as opposed to pattern matching and direct words. And then you could layer on unstructured data on top of it in order to derive different insight. So we were selling it to market research firms and survey companies and things like that. But it is so fascinating to see how fast, you say this hasn't been, around 7-8 years, but, it was just under a different guise. It was under a different name. And I think, we had tossed around, I remember the term AI, but I think that was too advanced for people, especially in, people who were trying to purchase a software to help the specific needs that they were trying to identify. But yes, it has been lightning fast since that time to see the growth of that space, which we, look forward to supporting in whichever ways we can.
Sweet. I guess, Jason, just to follow up on that, you actively have AI agents. Are you looking at ethical AI design, ensuring your TouchBrick agents avoid bias or they respect that user consent of the data?
Yeah, absolutely. And so there's user consent. There's another kind of like pattern that the team is moving into is kind of an empaneled jury of models, ensuring that we adhere to those guidelines and we're not just reliant on one model's kind of like models have this like tendency to want to like always satisfy what was asked. Always, never, kind of provide like an answer. Like their mission is to provide the answer, and sometimes it's like no matter what, and that can have some really bad consequences when it comes to things like authorization of use, and personal data and all of that. So we absolutely take that approach in everything we do. We also make sure that whatever we do has the notion of like the human AI, like whether it's a human in the loop or other aspects around auditability and control, and not just auditing like the actions or the data or the triggers, but auditing, kind of the entire context of what was asked, what was performed, and who was it done on behalf of. And then that way we can kind of still wrap, whether it's kind of like ethical definitions or how we expect the system to behave, we need to understand that at all times and always kind of make improvements so that the AI is, exactly, like it's here for us and not just something that's kind of leveraging us. We don't want to repeat, Web 2.0 all over again.
Yeah, no doubt. Hey, Matt, you talked earlier about interoperability, right? I think you brought up Plume. That's the name. So how do you see AI potentially helping with interoperability of our RWA tokenization across networks?
It's an interesting question. But really, I think it's just making things more accessible and simple. So, just kind of as an example, one of the main products we're working on right now is a private credit product where you can actually invest capital, lock it, and then earn stable coins. But we're not just keeping that as a walled garden XDC. You can actually choose any EVM chain to be able to receive that yield on. And what we kind of see coming in the future. Now, listen, I'm not these guys as far as running these projects. I have the best job ever because I get to bring the pros on. But it's once these chains are connected, to be able to see these AI applications come in and make things happen in a much smoother capacity, especially when you talk about oracles and pricing. I think that's what I'm excited to see. I mean, the game's kind of just starting here. So I really do think there's nothing but opportunity. It's just going to make things simpler and more efficient is really where I'm excited, to see.
Yeah, I shameless plug. The spotlight here, which brought us all together today, is the XDC community RWAI Dev Sprint, right? So we launched a 4-week developer sprint that has brought together 10 ecosystem partners. So everyone who already has infrastructure or tooling on the XDC network. And together we're offering $78,000 in prize money, total prize money across developers who want to dive into real world asset tokenization and AI agents. And it's quite a spread of technology. Obviously, the XDC Foundation has been, they provided support with hosting today, along with the bridge for the USDC, Civic with their identity, Crossmint with their Goat SDK, Eliza OS for their AI framework. You were talking about oracles. There are actually 2 oracles part of this. There's Plugin, which was the first oracle on XDC, and then a new tech coming out, Quex, which uses TEE, trusted execution environments. We have Akka Finance, which is a aggregator, and obviously Cracked Labs, who's brought us all together and is supporting this overall dev sprint. And so our focus really is to connect real world application RWA tokenization projects with AI devs and see what we can make within the next 4 weeks. We're not looking for a full product, but an MVP really gets those projects to the next phase of incubation and acceleration through Cracked Labs. And so my question to you guys, obviously, Jason, you may be biased and you're building your own agent, but you did talk about having MCPs. And so, well, I guess I'll start with you. What's a project that you would like to see these developers tackle that maybe come out of the sprint?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of what Ian was touching on before, which is around how do we get consumer use cases in the hands of more people. How does just anybody who's slightly interested have an easy way to start, interacting with, owning, trading, or just leveraging RWAs in their everyday use, right? Decentralized AI, DPIN, and things like that. It all sounds great, and from a technologist perspective, it's like, yes, we can see like how the future is with that, but like, how does it actually get used, and how do we use it in our day-to-day, right? We don't just want kind of like more apps that are hey, I'm going to get like rewards for like clicking on a thing or logging into an app. It's I actually like it meets me in my day, right? Like I'm going grocery shopping, or I'm going to pick up my kids from school or whatnot. Like, what are use cases where RWAs come into that? So specifically, what comes to mind is how stable coins. I mean, stable coins are like such the thing going forward in terms of like killer use case, killer consumer use case, and so necessary in so many different ways, right? Like, I just, even in my personal life, have like, payments I need to send to someone, things that I need to do, where it's like, even things like Zelle, like they don't get it done, for me, and wanting simpler ways to exchange and pay people in my life, right? And having a means to do that, I think that's what I would love to see, is like, what's that like killer consumer app that leverages stable coins and RWAs and allows just our life to get simpler, and for the tech to kind of like disappear into the background a little bit more.
No doubt. And would those apps use TouchBrick technology to support their data?
Of course, we need to have private data in all cases, right? We need to protect our data. So 100%. Yeah, even on the roadmap for the company too, is definitely some things around like, consumer use cases and kind of data privacy at scale. So we're very excited about that.
I'll jump in there, Jonathan,
yeah,
too, if it's cool. Just because I think what we're seeing is kind of a change in this crypto space, right? So getting away from the hodl mentality, up until now, it's been kind of like just holding tokens, hoping tokens go up in price. I want to actually see these networks, like and the dApps built on top, getting to this, actually utilizing those services. Stable coins, like Jason was touching on, are the game changer, because now it's really about getting the yield on chain, but being able to reinvest it. Up until now, we've seen really in the RWA space, tokenized treasuries, but the yield you're earning can't be transferred. And it's really like 5% isn't going to really cut it. Then you have like ETFs, same thing. So rich guy A can invest a ton of money, but once he wants to realize that gain, he has to close the position, he's back off chain. So what we're looking at are ways to actually have funds that allow you to lock capital, earn the yield in stablecoin on chain, to then reinvest as a VC in projects, or reinvest as in my product, to get user adoption as rewards, and taking off chain profit to use as that yield. So now you end up having this like this pool of capital, and you get away from the volatility that we've seen, and you can actually have businesses forecasting and planning and utilizing the tech, but on chain. So like, once you get on chain, you stay on chain. That's what I think the difference is, and what I'm excited to see.
Yeah, being able to collateralize on a stable asset is huge for that.
Yep. Yeah, there's a AI agent, Liquid Protocol, which is doing something very similar to that, which is providing the liquidity once you bring it on chain, so you can start to redistribute, and it's really, really neat. I'm hoping that they join this dev sprint.
Ian, if we want to see under collateralized lending, like the things that we have off chain, on chain. Sorry, I get
I get it. The
future. Thanks, sir.
Ian, what you're just going to have demo day tomorrow, right? And so you're not closing, but this chapter of the accelerator is ending. If you were to launch an AI RWA accelerator, what type of projects would you be looking at?
So one project that we have been advanced. So again, I keep going back to like, we like touching government. We like finding, I guess, sources of truth, right, that can integrate back into the market. So, I think that there have been plenty of real estate plays out there, but none that have actually gotten to the source of truth, which is the deed or the title. And so we have been advancing an MOU with a county registry of deeds in order to do that, to replicate titles and deeds on chain.
That's awesome.
To integrate back into the economy. And then, of course, within, ideally, we facilitate a continuum that can allow transactions to be facilitated between, of course, lenders, payors, payees, banks, and legal, whoever's involved in that transaction. And so, that's one we love because that is one that touches a lot of people, right? It's just government works slow, and it goes back to what we were talking about before. So, I think for us, there's certainly a lot of commercial applications that I think that would be easy to bake people in. I think what is easy for us and what is is going to be advantageous is that we get to put out a call for applications and get to see what ideas others have and which we want to support. So,
no doubt that makes sense. I do want to thank you all for being here and having this discussion. We're going to close out in a few minutes, but I want to throw a final question. It's one that you've probably had a couple of times, but I'll give it to you anyways. What's your bold prediction on sort of AI blockchain interoperability for the next 3 to 5 years? Where are we headed? Matt, start at layer 1. Where are we going?
The game has just started. Where we're going is actual adoption, real use, and real tangible value. I just see it. No one wants to be first. No one wants to be last. I think the last few years have been pilots and kind of like these testing phases. But what we're seeing now is any real company, everyone's really trying to join the game. They know digital assets are the future. It's not an if, it's just when. So that's what I'm excited to see.
Nice. And Ian?
Yeah, I mean, I now hear these terms, agentic economy and agentic commerce being tossed around, at an accelerated rate. And I think that, both of those areas are going to drastically transform the way that data is managed, services are provided, and institutions interact. And I think that, we play sort of at the center of that.
And I guess, Jason, take us home.
Yeah, sure. I think that like the actual model of the future of agentic AI is dependent on the blockchain. I just saw like an article recently where it said like, your agent has your credit card, right, and has your bank account and is acting on your behalf. And I think that like the bold prediction is that blockchain, the mature blockchain players and layer ones like XDC that are focused on the right kind of like just sophisticated and serious use cases are going to be the foundation and the underpinning for how AI and agentic AI goes forward. Like the two are married without really knowing about it yet. When people talk about ethical AI and they talk about AI adoption at scale and how the future looks, they mention all these things that actually just point to blockchain, right? And just point to having, real world assets and digital assets that are our avatars, right? We need an avatar for our data. We need an avatar for ourselves. We need an avatar for all of those things. That's digital assets. And there's no central anything where digital assets should ever exist because we don't own them and you need to actually own them. So all of that together kind of points to what the future really is, where it wasn't about we went from blockchain and now AI is here, so we're going to jump on that. It's like, no, these are things that have happened together and are going forward together.
Yeah, I spent many years in high-end computing, edge computing. I actually hold a patent for monitoring power stations at terabytes of data and then pushing them up to the cloud so they could be evaluated by historians. I see like predictive maintenance. I see agents living on instruments and hardware and actively doing the monitoring and pushing data rather than having, to pull data for large automation in manufacturing. That's where I see agent, and I'm biased because we're building huge robotic and automation systems, right? But I see it going to the point of just each like individual piece of hardware is going to have a little agent living in it that represents that hardware that can communicate to a larger system and environment. So I'm super excited about it. We don't want to see and you all touched on this, real world projects, right? We don't want to see on the RWAI sprint a talk to my wallet, right? It's probably not going to be where industry and real world assets eventually, maybe they'll be there. But right now, I don't see someone going to trade their hard-earned money by just talking to a computer saying, go trade me $1. It's a good proof of concept, but I think there are a lot of underlying foundational pieces that need to come together first in order for that to come to fruition. With that said, I'm going to close this out. Any last words from the three of you?
Hey, thanks for having us, Jonathan. It was a great conversation. Great to meet you, Jason and Matt, and look forward to continuing the relationship with XDC.
Same here. Hope this is the first of many podcasts, Jonathan.
All right.
Thanks for having us.
All right. Thanks everyone.
So much,
Have a great
Jonathan.
day.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Bye,
Thanks.
Jason. Bye,
Talk to you guys.